Have you ever been interested in the criminal mind? Who hasn't? Have you ever wondered about the fundamental differences between these people and these people? While there are many biological factors that go into what makes people tick, today we are going to learn more about the unemotional brain and how it affects the people who have it. Antisocial personality disorder, or APD, is a relatively new term. You may be more familiar with its former label, sociopathy or sociopath. These terms have, however, fallen out of use within the psychological community. The 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or DSM-5, defines antisocial personality disorder as a pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others. Some of the major symptoms of the disorder include a lack of empathy for others, inflated ego, deceitfulness, superficial charm, irresponsibility and exploitation in relationships, inability to tolerate boredom, irritability, aggression, impulsivity, and reckless disregard for personal safety or the safety of others. Antisocial personality disorder can only be diagnosed in an individual over the age of 18, with symptoms manifesting as early as 15. In fact, adults diagnosed with anti-personality disorder have exhibited evidence of conduct disorder in childhood as well. Researchers have used brain imaging techniques for years to determine just what exactly sets these individuals apart from, well, everyone else. For the APD brain, positron emission tomography, magnetic resonance imaging, and functional magnetic resonance imaging have been more widely used. Let's start with positron emission tomography, also known as a PET scan. In neurology, scientists use this machine to create a 3D image of the brain using radioactive tracers that are injected into the bloodstream. Does sound like some sort of James Bond villain's plan to take over the world, right? But don't worry, these tracers are virtually harmless. You see, the idea is that when a part of the brain is in use, blood flow to that area will increase. The radioactive tracers in the bloodstream light up and help scientists construct an understanding of what happens in what places. Comparing PET scans against groups provides insight onto which brain regions are abnormal. For the APD brain, PET scans have identified unusual activity in the anterior or back part of a region called the orbital frontal cortex, right here. This region is understood to be responsible for emotional reinforcement processing, integrating information from the senses, and decision-making. One study using PET imaging suggests that for the APD brain, abnormalities in this region may be linked to aggressive impulse control. So remember, the next time you have to restrain yourself from punching a wall or, calling someone out on Facebook, you know that good guy orbital frontal cortex has got your back. Let's chat about magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI. MRI machines have been imaging the human brain since the late 70s. An MRI is able to create an image of the brain using super important gadgets called magnets. An MRI machine creates a strong magnetic field that affects the charged atoms in your brain. This image illustrates an example of how hydrogen atoms are affected within the MRI's magnetic field. In the first picture, you see that the atoms in our bodies are not oriented in one particular way. However, when your body enters the magnetic field produced by the MRI, the atoms orient themselves to the direction of the field. When this step is complete, the MRI machine targets the hydrogen atoms, and then it emits a radio frequency pulse over the desired areas. A few of the atoms begin to spin rapidly in the opposite direction of the others at a particular frequency. 3 smaller magnets within the MRI machine move around the body, manipulating the atoms of specific areas. When this is complete, the radio frequency pulse is shut off and the atoms of the body return to their original positions. As they return, the atoms emit a signal that coils of the machine pick up and send to a computer. The machine is able to form an image from this data using crazy mathematical formulas that translate the codes into pictures. MRI scans have illuminated the areas that are really most likely to be involved in the manifestation of antisocial personality disorder. For example, one major study used this technique to determine deficits in the prefrontal cortex of APD brains without incidents of trauma due to brain injury. When compared to healthy individuals, the APD brain shows an 11% reduction in volume of prefrontal gray matter. Although this reduction is not seen clearly visually, it is significant enough to severely alter behavior. The prefrontal cortex, right here, includes the orbital frontal cortex spoken of before and is highly associated with fear response and stress response. Researchers have guessed that underdevelopment of these two responses contribute to the lack of conscience evident in APD. The prefrontal cortex is also related to the regulation of arousal through the autonomic nervous system. Abnormalities here seem to be responsibility for the reckless impulsivity and stimulation-seeking behaviors exhibited, probably to compensate for the lack of arousal. In another study using MRI to study the APD brain, researchers focused on the corpus callosum. The brain is essentially made of two separate hemispheres, or parts, connected by white matter. The white matter is given its name by the milky appearance of nerve fibers that it consists of. The bundled nerve fibers of the corpus callosum act as an interstate between the two hemispheres, allowing information to be relayed back and forth. Studies have found that individuals with antisocial personality disorder have several abnormalities at the corpus callosum, including a high percentage of callosal volume increase. The abnormal characteristics of the corpus callosum in the APD brain are understood to be due to irregular pruning or excessive myelination of neurons. When the corpus callosum is atypical, the exchange of information between the hemispheres is reduced. This reduction is implicated in affective, interpersonal, spatial deficits, as well as difficulties in attention and arousal. An enlarged corpus callosum has been found to be associated with lack of affect, lack of remorse, lack of close friendships, lack of social intelligence, and a reduced heart rate activity during stress. All of these are classic symptoms of APD. The last imaging technique we'll discuss is functional magnetic resonance imaging. An fMRI machine is similar to both a PET scan and an MRI, but instead of injecting the body with radioactive elements or imaging organs and tissues, the fMRI measures blood flow via the presence of oxygen. When the brain becomes active in a particular area, there becomes an increased demand for oxygen. Oxygen-rich blood then flows quickly to the area where it is picked up by the fMRI machine. Basically, researchers found that the magnetic fields of oxygen-rich blood and oxygen-poor blood are different, teaching the computer to pick out particular magnetic fields based on their characteristics provide doctors with a clear picture of brain region functionality. One study used fMRI imaging to determine the differences between cerebral, peripheral, and subjective associations to fear responses in healthy brains versus APD brains. Participants were conditioned to fear a slightly painful application of pressure to their skin when presented with the face of a man. Prior to learning, the presentation of the face was accompanied by a single full brain scan. After the association between pain and the face was learned, each presentation of the face was accompanied by 2 full brain scans. The researchers found that those participants with APD were significantly different from the healthy controls in all brain regions. Most notably, while the healthy controls exhibited activation in amygdala of the left hemisphere, APD participants showed only activation in the amygdala of the right hemisphere. Researchers explain the difference as a potential lack of emotional conditioning. In other words, the APD brain is able to learn the association, however, they are unable to process the emotional significance of it. The orbital frontal cortex seems to have a direct relationship with the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. fMRI scans of this nature have supported the understanding that antisocial personality disordered individuals have specific deficits in prefrontal blood flow and reduced prefrontal volume. Although there seems to be a lot of information out there indicating common brain regions as contributing to antisocial personality disorder, the truth is that the disorder is still relatively not understood. A combination of extensive brain imaging techniques with reliable and willing participants, as well as further research into antisocial behavior, is going to be needed to better conceptualize the unemotional brain.